Blessings. Interlude Celestine. Celestine had mixed feelings as she watched her cousin tuck her daughter to sleep. She had never expected to see Erwin again. That conversation long ago where the woman, then still a girl, had confided in her that she was leaving, following her heart in the forum which had entranced so many of them. Gunther. He had been secretive and mysterious, knowledgeable and talented, rugged, and with a strange accent that echoed the old tongue in ways so familiar yet also so very different. Celestine had been just one of the many who had fallen for him, enjoyed his attentions. Then Erwin had won and claimed him as her own. At the time it had stung. Seeing her now, lacking in the hidden lore he had so tantalizingly dangled before them, lacking the man she had abandoned her life to chase, Celestine felt more pity than envy. She had her Robin, her precious little girls, a life free of fear and reprisal, with even the local lord stepping in to protect his plant witch that provided such aid to his peasantry. And even beyond that, her status as the strongest of the entire coven made her feel secure. She was not the eldest nor speaker, yet, but in time she would be both. For all there was no love lost between her and her old teacher, the old witch had never hesitated to crowd to all that Celestine would succeed her. How could she not feel satisfied with her life? The loss of her elder brother to war and her father to grief, and before this day her sister in noble blood to a man, had been the only true sore points in it. Even back then, it had not taken long for the loss of Erwin to sting more than the loss of Gunther. For 5 years she had returned to that tree to wait for her, expecting her to return a great witch and show all that Gunther had taught her. But that day had never come. And now she had returned, a woman changed. She is his and not some other? Celestine asked quietly once she was sure the young girl was fast asleep. She has his eyes. Bright and inquisitive amber. Unusual to be sure, and combined with what Celestine could see of Erwin in her, the young girl would be impressive as she grew. Yes, Erwin said shortly. I told you I don't. I will ask no more. Celestine shook her head. That was all she needed to know for now. Have you been well, cousin? It has been nearly 10 years now. She listened as Erwin slowly began to speak of her life, all mentions of Gunther carefully omitted. One day she would hear the full story, but for now it would do. While Erwin was sick after foolishly acting like a bumbling apprentice and pushing herself past her breaking point, Celestine found her ability to teach Gwyneth limited. The girl constantly distracted, fidgeting and worrying. The sour mood building in the house as Erwin felt guilty for her daughter taking the time to take care of her wasn't doing much good either. Erwin, you've made a right mess, Celestine told her. Why did you push yourself like that? And don't give me the tripe that you wanted to keep up with her. She's nearly as much to work with as me. You know better. To Celestine's frustration, Erwin was slow to reply, staring blankly at the ceiling for several minutes. One of the few good things to come out of this event, perhaps the sole good thing, was Gwyneth sitting still long enough for Emmeline to get her hands on her. It had been a surprise the first time she had found her daughter sitting in their cousin's lap, dozing happily while drooling into her shirt. More surprising was the lack of bother Gwyneth seemed to have with it. She had had no time for Roger at that age. Certainly not enough to hold conversations with a child that could not form complete sentences. She's leaving me behind, Erwin said. And I'm just holding her back. Celestine couldn't stop herself snorting at that answer. Leaving you behind? She cuts lessons. She spends every waking moment at your side. She is stronger than you, but you cannot claim she is leaving you behind when her whole world revolves around you. She didn't even bother to entertain the idea that Erwin, who had raised the witch that would most likely surpass Celestine herself as the strongest alive, had somehow been holding her back. The very notion was mad. Erwin replied with a quiet whisper, while Celestine only half heard. Maybe it shouldn't. Their conversation died as Erwin seemed unwilling to talk further, wishing to be alone to brood in her own misery. Years ago, Celestine would have pressed harder, tried to force engagement, But Erwin was a woman grown. Her family would be waiting for her when she was ready to accept help. But one person's self-inflicted sorrow did not stop the business of their lives. Erwin, what are you doing? Celestine asked, her brow creased confusedly. Just what was Erwin doing packing up a traveler's bundle? Is that for Gwen when we leave for initiation? We have saddlebags, and it is over a month yet. Erwin had frozen at the sound of her voice. Why? It was almost as if she was hiding what... No, she would not. Tell me, Celestine demanded. I'm holding her back, Erwin replied. It wasn't an answer, not to her question, but it was a reason. A terrible, broken reason, and one that so awfully fit the woman Erwin was. Once she had stood up to Grimsby to protect her, to take on punishment not meant for her, for Celestine's mistakes or youthful foolishness, simply because she felt she owed her for taking her in. Fool. Self-sacrificing fool. Forgetting that just as she cared for others, others cared for her. Holding her back? Celestine snapped, desperately wanted to shake some sense into her. By the ancients, woman, do you even understand why she frets over you? Every moment you pull away, every moment you wallow in your belief you don't deserve her, you make her afraid. Afraid that you will abandon her. Each time you fall into moping, her heart aches, and she wants nothing more than to see you happy, distracting her from her lessons and damaging her growth. I know, Erwin said. But that's why I should... No! Celestine moved up and tore the pack from Erwin's hands. What would you do if you left? Do you know how I felt when you left me to chase after Gunther? Jealous? You were jealous he gave me his attention. All I do is make things worse. I can't teach her. I distract her. Why? Tossing the pack aside, Celestine kneeled down, uncaring of the dirt and mud, and wrapped her arms around her cousin. Jealous? You think I was jealous? Maybe, but far more I was hurt. My family, my sister, left me behind the chains after a man. Our promise to become witches together, to raise our children together, forgotten. The memory hurt. They had parted on decent terms. Celestine had said her goodbyes. Erwin had said she was going to leave, and they had made a promise to share all they learned in time. Only Erwin had vanished. 10 years until she came again. A brother dead, a father lost, her mother refusing to live in the home that Celestine had been raised in. You wounded me, Celestine said, wrapping up Erwin even tighter. You cut into my heart and the scar still has not faded. You would do that to your own daughter. You did it to mine. I want my Emma and Rosa to have their aunt, so I will not let you go. But No, it has been too long, sister. The days they would hold one another in comfort, would discuss their future, would flee from Grimsby's ire while laughing over her acts of defiance, only to regret it and commiserate days later. For 6 years they had been inseparable. I won't lose you again. For some time still, Erwin tried to struggle and protest, but she eventually broke down crying, sobbing and wailing into Celestine's arms. Robin came looking for her, and she set him to keep the children occupied somewhere else. The wound needed to be drained so Erwin could be made to feel well again, so they could be a family once more. Sitting there and stroking Erwin's hair was such a nostalgic thing for Celestine. They were much older now, more than a quarter of their lives gone, neither blushing violets and both so much wiser and worldly, yet also so much more fragile. In time, Erwin gained back control of herself and they shifted. Still resting together, but more comfortably, simply enjoying the quiet friendship they had shared so often before. What even was your plan? Celestine asked. You won't tell Gwen? Erwin asked, and Celestine shook her head. I don't want her to know. Don't want her to think I need her to spend her time on me. She needs to learn. She needs to be cared for, not to be the one caring for me. Her breath heaved and her voice was thick, threatening to return her to tears. I would have gone north, to Pyrewood or Ember Hill, far from where our kind live. If I stayed in our circles, she would hunt me down. I know that. She would find me. And Celestine would have helped her. Don't let her ruin her education, Celestine, Erwin said, turning and clasping Celestine's hands. Not for me, not for anything. Promise me, until she has learned all she can as an apprentice, you won't let her go. Celestine studied her close friend, her chosen sister, the tears on her face and her shaky voice. Yet, still there was fire and determination there. You will stay, make amends and stand by her, supporting her? You'll be an aunt to my daughters? Erwin's gaze flickered down. I promise I will try. Pulling Erwin into another hug, Celestine smiled. Then yes, I give you my word. I will not let your daughter know what happened today. Nor will I let anything harm her apprenticeship with me. Letting go, Celestine felt her smile turn strangely wistful. Perhaps she will even surpass me and my record. They both laughed. Gwyneth was an incredible child, clever beyond her years and with more talent and desire to learn magic than either of them had. Rare was any child allowed to even dabble with magic before their apprenticeship formally began. And yet, she had come to start merely by watching her mother when she was 3 years old. On almost all occasions, teaching Gwyneth took hardly any effort. The girl could follow her actions, her magics, without even the little struggle Celestine herself had had as a young girl. And Celestine had been years older when she first began to dabble in the magics of their craft under old Grimms. There were many things strange about her, but the bright smiles, the happy play with Emmeline, the willingness she had to perform tasks, and the way she accepted the cruel judgment of the ignorant. Whatever lurked between the exterior of Gwyneth, it was no cruel monster. When she, Erwin and Robin took to drink on some nights after their children were abed, they thought up theories on what caused the girl so young to be so different. Robin thought she was blessed, be it by the light or one of the keepers of old. Erwin thought she was reincarnated, an old soul in a young body. Celestine herself found herself leaning towards it simply being a case of a hard life of travel shaping one to be responsible, and the usage of magic from such a young age altering the formation of the mind. It was common knowledge that mages went a little strange due to their use of the arcane. They could hardly claim their magic was immune to such things. And the young mind was so very malleable. Still, it had almost been a relief when she encountered something the girl did not seem to grasp immediately. Did not grow in sudden leaps and bounds to rival Celestine's more than a decade of practice within weeks. Passable, Celestine said, hearing Gwyneth's sigh of relief as she finally finished the task that had been set before her. No better than the original, yet no worse either. Her sole previous success. Why exactly the girl had such an issue imbuing carved totems and found weaving flowers easier, if not greatly so, was not something Celestine knew. I'm sorry for disappointing you, Mistress Celestine, Gwyneth replied meekly. Celestine shook her head. I'm not disappointed. You still show more skill than most. Not all witches need to be adept at all of their craft. Erwin was an excellent herbalist, a competent alchemist, but in magic outside the domain of aiding plants, it was no better than it had been 10 years ago. I believe your efforts will be better spent elsewhere. You will still need to learn, if only so that you may teach your own apprentices and children when the time comes, but understand that this is not your calling. Gwyneth didn't look terribly happy with that answer, but few would be. I understand. Their interactions for the day ended there. So long as she had direction, Gwyneth could learn alone quite effectively, and had even taken it upon herself to learn to write properly before Celestine had a chance to acquire it of her. And the brief period in which she had queried the girl on her sums had honestly left Celestine a little dizzy. The notion was strange but swift. Gnomish, perhaps? They were considered experts at such things. She could hardly believe things had suddenly taken a turn for the worse. Why did Gwyneth have to give her mother that damnable wraith? For weeks Erwin had made strides in recovering, having more good days than bad and connecting with little Emma. Seeing the three of them play together, Gwen acting as a big sister for Celestine's own daughter while Erwin watched over them. It had been the very scene they had imagined all those years ago when they promised to be there for one another. And once again it had all come tumbling down. Erwin wouldn't speak, wouldn't answer, wouldn't give her word that she would be there when they returned. All Celestine could do was hope that she would recover, come to understand that Gwen had not been trying to push her away, no matter how faultless her gift had been. Robin would try to convince Erwin in her absence, and Emma too. Perhaps all her worries were for naught. For now she had to get her charge, her grumpy and upset charge, all the way to the crowned king of the Blackwold. Gwyneth, see to the horse's feet while I speak to the proprietor, Celestine said, sliding off of Sable's back and moving towards the hall of the coaching inn. We have an early morning ahead of us. The only response she got was a moody grunt, though Gwyneth at least set about her task properly. It was going to be several long weeks of travel. For Celestine, the rite of initiation had never held near as much meaning as it had so recently. She was proud of Gwyneth for her answer. Some may not have liked it, but it showed she would not be deterred. For an older girl, it would have been presumptuous, but for one so young, it was necessary. Even the Rose-Thorn girl turned some eyes with her age, having not yet had her first cycle and thus still a child in truth. In her own mind, judging a girl's adulthood by when she first began to bleed was foolish, but it was tradition. Jocelyn's defiant words calling her daughter off age simply because she was 12 indicated she thought such as well. When it came to the visions, Gwyneth had been held in rapture far longer than anyone Celestine could remember. All had heard the beat of the raven's wings upon Talorn as the first minute blended into the second, then the fifth. A quarter of an hour before the young girl, her apprentice, had started weeping, but still stood strong. It was only when she had started gasping for air and the ravens cried out in concern that Old Grims had forced the water upon her. Were there even records of one lasting so long that it had to be forced out of the visions? Her own had been long yet scant. She had witnessed the Green Lady tending to Talorn, their most sacred of gods nurturing their most sacred of places. She had seen from a raven's eye view the lands of Gilneas, soaring high above where one could see the whole of the headlands and the bight laid out before them. Other broken fragments had been lost to time, but the true purpose of the rite, to show the truth of their beliefs, and to humble those who thought themselves special, they remained. The Rose-Thorn girl had been impressive by the standards of many, lasting well into her 5th minute before she broke into sobs and started asking for it to stop. Jocelyn had kept her there for several more until she let Old Grims free the young witch from Talorn's thrall. Meredith's foundling, on the other hand, reminded her unpleasantly of how Grimsby had treated Erwin, not as someone to be taught to be a witch, but as a body to be used to make her life easier. A reaction to Meredith's son wanting nothing to do with the odious woman. And even worse for the girl, she did not even have Erwin's talent with plants. Irresponsible, and a tragedy in the making, but it was not her place to interfere. Not yet, at least. If it had been the older girl Gwyneth had made a friendship with, she would have had to caution her against it, tried to guide her choices. But for one reason or another, she found the company of the Rose-Thorn girl more appreciable. A good thing, though they would not see each other again for years. It's time, Gwyneth, Celestine said. We need to prepare the mallow grass for you. This is where you'll be put to sleep. You will wake in Roland's lodge soon enough. Gwyneth didn't look happy, her face shifting awkwardly, but she nodded her acceptance. There would not be a repeat of the mess they went through on the way to Talorn. It had been Celestine's right to do what she did, but that did not mean she could not see why Gwyneth had been upset. It was easier to admit a mistake, even when she did not truly believe it one, than to fight with her apprentice further. The girl was family. After the near disaster that had been their stop in that pathetic little village, Celestine was relieved at the sight of the bite, and not long after, home at last. Gwyneth was also eager to be back, to see her mother. But any relief Celestine felt fell away when she saw Robin's face at the door. Not cheerful and ready to greet them, but wearing a forlorn and remorseful expression as Gwyneth jumped off of Hazel and ran up to the house. "Damn you, Erwin," she said, dropping off of Sable and trusting the horses to take care of themselves. Sable knew well where his stall was and that there would be wolf and hay there for him. "Husband?" she asked, walking up to the house. Inside, she could hear Gwyneth calling for her mother, her voice growing more confused. "She left 2 weeks ago," he said, looking down and clenching his hands into fists. Near broke Emma's heart, having her auntie vanish in the night. "Christ damn you, Erwin. How could you?" Celestine muttered. Gwyneth came back out of the house, a baffled look on her face. "I can't find Mama," she said. "Robin, did she go into town? Or is she out?" Robin shook his head, but his eyes were on her and begging her to answer in his place. "Did she leave anything?" she asked instead. "She didn't want this. She did not want this. Why, Erwin? Why did you have to do this?" "A letter, a note, anything?" "Celestine?" Gwyneth asked worriedly. "She did. It should be in her cot. I didn't touch it and told Emma not to." Robin turned to Gwyneth. "Erwin, your mother..." He struggled for a moment before sighing. "She left. Vanished in the night, not but a letter left behind." A myriad of emotions ran across Gwyneth's face. Disbelief, fury, horror, fear, doubt, and so many more. "No." She shook her head, settling on denial. "No, Mama wouldn't. She wouldn't do that." Celestine had promised not to tell Gwyneth that Erwin so nearly had before, to keep it secret. She regretted that promise. Gwyneth should have known. Should have been informed how delicate she was. That damnable wraith! "She tried to leave before, but I stopped her. Not long before your first woodchipping lesson, after she collapsed. I caught her packing a traveler sack and convinced her to stay." The words felt hollow. She had convinced Erwin to stay, but it lasted a bare 3 months, of which only 2 had been while she could spend time with her daughter. "You're lying," Gwyneth said, shaking her head fast enough her hair was whipping around her. "Mama!" "She's gone," Robin said. "Read the letter and tell us what she said. She's hurt all of us." Gwyneth shot a defiant glare at Robin before turning and stomping her way to the cot, uncaring of the snow she was scattering on the wooden floor. She quickly found the letter, tearing it open and devouring it. "No," she said, her hands starting to shake. "No!" It was a strangled, sorrowful denial, swallowed swiftly by tears and a sob, then a heart-wrenching wail as the letter fell from her hands. "Mama!" Emmeline had heard Gwyneth's voice and came to investigate. Walking on her own, she paused at the outburst. Within moments, she too was shedding tears and wailing. "Go to our daughter," Celestine said, giving him a comforting squeeze on the arm. "I'll handle the fallout." Robin nodded with relief and left her to deal with Gwyneth, a girl who had just lost her only parent, whose cries were warping and twisting the wooden floor upon which she sat. A hand placed upon her back was smacked away. Any attempted touch and comfort her was met with distressed flailing. All she could do was sit beside her in solidarity. Erwin had left her. Again. She'd had her sister back. They were close again after so long. And now it hurt just like it had back then. Only Erwin had hurt even more people this time. It was wrong of her. It wasn't meant for her. It was meant for the girl crying at her side. And yet, with her own heart feeling broken, Celestine picked up the letter and read. "My dearest little blessing, I love you. I will remember every moment we shared as a treasure, as something beyond any value in coin. You are the one thing in my life that hasn't been a failure, hasn't been a mistake. My father once told me I had 2 choices, to continue to listen to the witch and follow her ways, or to live in his house. I followed my heart and chose to become a witch. Though I felt it was my calling, my purpose, I was no Celestine. I was not you. I struggled, and still do struggle, to make the barest mysteries of our craft work. I am perhaps the weakest of all witches, though can I even call myself one when I ran away from my apprenticeship? I have never spoken of your father. I do not regret you, but I regret him. He came to us one summer, wild and mysterious, powerful and wise. He taught lessons that even I could make use of. Celestine's craft advanced beyond anything in our history under his guidance. I was envious. But I had one thing Celestine did not: my beauty, and from that his attention. I had followed love between us, and when he moved on, I followed, and followed, and followed, toyed with like a favorite plaything. But when I was ready to tell him I was pregnant, that we were to have a child, he was gone, aboard a ship and vanished into the ocean. All I truly knew of him was his name, Gunther, and that he spoke fondly of the sea. But that is not why I was writing this letter. Perhaps it is his blood, though I would not resent you if that was the case. I truly wish it wasn't. That is the cause of your strength. But for years I have felt inadequate, insufficient. You are more than I can ever be, and all I do is hold you back. How much could you learn if you did not insist on staying by my side, wasting days aiding me in simple menial chores? How much could you do if I let you go free as you should be? Celestine will teach you far better than I ever could. Will take care of you. You have family. You are becoming a wonderful sister for her daughter. I love you, my little blessing. May you soar free without me to tie you down. Erwin Erwin. I don't think I'll ever forgive you again, Erwin, Celestine whispered in the wind, drowned out by the broken cries of a child bereft. You knew. The accusation came after Gwyneth woke from crying herself to sleep, sharp and angry amber eyes turned upon Celestine. I worried, she answered. I did not know. You should have told me. Celestine nodded. I should have. Maybe if you had known, you could have convinced her. Perhaps you would not have forced upon her a symbol of your bond that you discarded. She cut herself off. It was not Gwyneth's fault she had lost her sister. But in the end it was your mother's choice. Gwyneth seethed, glaring at her, hands clenching and unclenching as her teeth ground against one another. You said you stopped her. What did she tell you? Gwyneth started at a reasonable volume, but it grew louder, a scream of anger. Where did Mama go? It was clear to her that if she spoke of where Erwin had planned to go, she would lose her apprentice. A 9-year-old child, sneaking away and trying to survive on her own. Perhaps she could even manage it. Maybe she was skilled and powerful enough to survive, mature enough to achieve her goal. But to let her leave would be a betrayal of herself and of what remained of her love for her chosen sister. I won't tell you, Celestine answered. I made a promise. Why? Celestine took in a deep breath and let it out. I made a promise. I would not compromise your education, your studies. Even if she broke her half of the promise, to stay, to remain and be an aunt to my daughter, I won't break it. Just tell me! She would not until Gwyneth was ready. No, only when you are ready. Gwyneth shrieked in anger, grabbing a plate and hurling it across the room, shattering it upon the wall. She was going for another as Celestine grabbed her arm and pinned her. Stop! I will tell you, but not today! Gwyneth didn't talk, great heaving breaths shaking her entire body as she struggled to free herself from Celestine's grip. Eyes wild and yet still focused, intently and angrily upon Celestine. You will complete your apprenticeship, learn all I am capable of teaching you. You will learn to defend yourself, with magic and without. Then, and only then, will I tell you what little of her plans Erwin entrusted to me. Celestine's voice cracked and broke, her own sorrow barely restrained. I swear to you, I will not hold you back, slow you down. But please, please don't make my daughter lose her sister like I have lost mine. Tears flowed onto her cheeks. The fury in Gwyneth's gaze didn't abate, but slowly her struggle ceased. As soon as I'm ready, she asked demandingly. No matter how old I am. Celestine nodded. I swear, I want her back as well. I want you to have her back. I never wanted this. Fine, Gwyneth said, pulling herself free of Celestine's slacking grip. For a moment, Celestine thought she would be hugged, that things would be mended between them as they had in the forest after the widow's offspring attacked them. But the girl turned, stomping away and gathering her things from her cot. But I'm not staying in here, she declared. I'll sleep outside if I have to. Later, Celestine would cry herself to sleep in her husband's arms. She felt just as she had all those years ago, beneath their rowan tree, waiting for Erwin to return when she never would.